Today's guest is Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens. Welcome, Drew.
6 weeks, I get to come back. Thank you, Robert.
Yes, you're a repeat guest here. How are you and your family doing 6 weeks after being our first guest?
Yeah, thank you. Everyone's fine. We're all healthy, and you know, my daughter finished her university studies in year one online. My son is still doing his homework in the 10th grade. Every day some assignments come in, so he's diligently doing that and enjoying playing video games at home, lots of video games and virtual reality. And my wife is working from home, so I get to come to the office and actually make sure that things are functioning and we're planning for the recovery. But the family is really good. Thank you for asking. Excellent.
How are council meetings going with the new social distancing and the technology that's now being used?
Well, I think we're probably, it's fair to say we're all adjusting and adapting. It's new for each and every one of us. And some are more, technology savvy than others. And so those who aren't are learning very quickly how it works and how to turn their mics on and off and just be able to function in an online environment. I think it's fair to say it is suboptimal. It is not the ideal way to run a city council meeting for the most part, but there are some benefits, and I could imagine if this is allowed to continue moving forward, that there may be some meetings that would make more sense to have virtually if there are no delegates and we can just communicate online. But you do miss some of the elements of public interaction, which we're working on improving, including moving to a Zoom platform where there's a lobby and we're able to park people in a lobby and bring them in as their topic comes forward. So I think it's been a little clumsy so far. Our IT department has done the best that they can do. It will continue to improve, and hopefully we'll be able to return to our new normal, whatever that looks like, in the fairly near future.
How are budgets for the city being affected? Is there any support coming from the federal or provincial government that you've heard?
Yeah, so the last report that we had, Robert, showed that the city was down. We have a budget hole of just over $11 million, and that carried us to the end of April. So every day that we click forward, now being really the middle of May, you can add a couple more million to that amount. And every day that this continues to move forward without sort of regular operations, that amount will continue to grow. And I can tell you that every city in this country, from coast to coast to coast, is experiencing some form of financial hardship or challenge. The bigger cities have it worse because we operate transit systems and have different types of services than smaller municipalities do. But it's fair to say that we are all in a bit of a financial crunch. And so the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is our federal body that advocates on the behalf of municipalities to the federal government, and they have certainly advocated for a subsidy of $10 to $15 billion. And so we know the federal government is focused today on making sure that people have money in their pockets, that businesses have money to function so that the economy can reboot at the right time. And we know we're probably going to be sort of lower on the list of priorities, but all indications, both federally and provincially, are positive. But I would doubt that every municipality will be made whole dollar for dollar, and it's something we'll have to address as a city council moving forward when we talk about budget items.
It's a difficult time for everyone, just trying to handle this and seeing what phases the provincial government will allow business to be open.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that people look at us as a government, which is appropriate, but in many ways we are just another type of business. And so we have different sets of rules that we operate under, but we are a business that has revenue, that has expenses. And so on the revenue side, we have seen dramatic drops in revenue. There are no pools, community centers, arenas opening. There's no fees collected. Transit is operating, so you have all of the expense of running the transit system, but you have zero revenue coming in because the system is free today. And so those are really, important operational considerations. And then on the property tax side, City Council made the right move, and we agreed to defer the payment of property taxes until the 30th of June. And we won't really know until the first week of July, once the receipts come in, precisely where we're at in terms of the hole that's created, because undoubtedly there will be some who haven't been working who are just unable to pay. And we'll have to grapple with that and the magnitude of that at the right time. But certainly Council has been very sensitive to the economic conditions in the community and across the world, frankly, going on, acted appropriately, and I think we're going to continue to review and make sure that we continue to act appropriately when it comes to making sure we're serving the residents.
One of those services you just mentioned, Transit Windsor, how's that being received? How is that going since it was reopened?
Yeah, so it's working okay. I still encourage people not to take transit unless it's an absolutely essential trip. In fact, our medical officer of health has warned folks who are in the vulnerable age category or those who have medical vulnerabilities not to take transit. In fact, his recommendation and the recommendation from the health unit is to the riders, consider walking or riding a bike. And so we're operating it. It's really for essential trips only. The capacity in the bus is limited to 10 passengers. And we're operating on the most reduced schedule we can operate on, which is the Sunday and holiday schedule. And so operating that way, we know that the volumes are down by more than 90%. The ridership is down by more than 90% compared to this time last year. And it's consistent with what systems all across Canada are experiencing, where ridership is down at least 90% or more, even in big cities like Toronto. And so it's working. We've put in the enhanced cleaning protocols, which are great. They seem to be working. We've protected the drivers in different ways and given them access to certain PPE. And for the most part, it's been working fairly well with a few challenges, but those were to be expected.
Yeah. Since this pandemic began, there are many social issues, stress, mental health in our community. What are some of the ways you're working to protect the health of our residents and alleviate some of these concerns?
Yeah, so this is tough for everybody, and it doesn't matter whether you're homeless, and I'd like to talk about that, or whether you are financially independent and have no mortgage. Everyone is impacted in some way financially, frankly, through this whole global pandemic. And so if I go right to sort of those who are most economically disenfranchised, the homeless people in our community, many of whom suffer from addiction and mental health, it's been a real challenge to try and respond in real time and create an environment where those folks, if they contract COVID-19 or are suspected of having the virus, that they have a safe place to self-isolate. And certainly in a regular shelter system, that is fairly impossible. And so we have worked really hard to open and take all of the rooms at a hotel at a motel rather on Howard Avenue. And we have police presence there. And I think people watching can appreciate that someone experiencing homelessness, if they're also suffering from something like addiction, they aren't medically able to self-isolate for 14 days and just stay in their room. That addiction calling is going to continue to haunt them, and they're going to want to leave to go feed the addiction. And so there are medical issues like that we have tried to wrap around some services. We have police at the motel 24/7, making sure that folks who are in that position really are getting the service they need, but aren't able to leave at their own discretion. Because obviously there's a high risk of community transmission in that case. And so if you're under quarantine, you're under quarantine, and we have police there to make sure that folks are properly quarantining while also receiving proper medical treatment for other issues that they may be experiencing. So that is the homeless. On the homeless front, that's what we're doing. It certainly has been a challenge, and it has opened our eyes to many of the vulnerabilities in the system, and really a need to do more and to do better on that front. And so we're examining ways to do that. And then I think when it comes to mental health and just general well-being, I think the community is responding really well. And I know that there have been some challenges. We get daily reports on some of the issues that are happening. And in a city with 240,000 people, there's always, something that is unexpected that you hear about. And, the one-offs are one thing. It's when you start seeing patterns or multiple types of behavior that you try to figure out how to respond appropriately to help people, because not everyone thinks about and deals with situations like this the same way. And there are some who are shut in. There are some who don't have family, or family is in another place and they're fairly isolated. And that does take a toll on some people in a different way than it does others. And so we're trying to help all of those people who need a little additional support. There have been hotlines and crisis lines set up, very well used, but also supported by experts in the community who are helping provide counseling and service to people. And by and large, Robert, I would say I'm just so impressed with the way the community is responding and helping each other. And so there is, of course, the city response to certain issues that are appropriate. But when I see things like Facebook groups set up where 1,500 people are saying, I want to deliver groceries and medication to seniors, and they're doing it for free. And you have a company like Lally Ford giving those people a free pickup truck to use to be able to do that. It's really like everyone coming together to say, how do we help and how do we all get through this? And I look at the Islamic Association, I look at the Polish group, I look at a whole host of other community groups, religious groups, cultural groups that have come together, and each of them are doing their own part to help support people in the community. And it's just great to see, and I'm so comforted as mayor to see that type of behavior take place.
Well, we're all in this together, right? That's part of our community. And there was a nice ceremony the other day at the border. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, many conversations going on from the Prime Minister, the Premier, and all the way down to different levels of government over the last couple months. And I did receive a call from the U.S. Consul General in Toronto, Greg Stanford. And Greg and I had met several times in the past, and in response to the border issue and the conversation in the community with respect to nurses crossing the border and healthcare professionals crossing the border, he understood acutely what that means, because he's a Michigander by birth, and he has family still living in Michigan. And so he knows, having grown up so close to this border, he knows the dynamics of the border and the importance to the U.S. healthcare system and what the border means to be able to support and facilitate the treatment of people in the greater Detroit area. And so he reached out and said, you guys, those workers are getting beat up a little bit, and we really want to do something to support them. And it was really based on things that were happening, and frankly still happening for some of these folks who, when they walk into an LCBO, there's a security guard at the door, and they say, have you been out of the country in the last 14 days? And if the worker says yes, and they answer honestly, they are often denied entry to the store, as if they're somehow more risky. And they are not the only store that has been doing that. And so these people are sort of bearing a disproportionate burden or responsibility, even though they've taken all the same precautions in the workplace as workers at hospitals here are able to take. And so he said, we really want to do something to recognize these folks who have gone through a little bit more than the average healthcare worker. And so they said, we want to come down. I said, what do you have in mind? He says, we want to come down and we want to go to the border and hand out gift cards to these people as they cross. And so he and his staff came to the community. They bought about $10,000 worth of gift cards from different local restaurants, and I'm talking independent restaurants, not the chains. And so really helping put a boost into the pocket of some of those restaurateurs who need a little help right now. And they came back with, 900 envelopes with gift cards. And we went to the border, the bridge, and the tunnel this week, and we handed them out as healthcare professionals crossed. And some of them were kind of expecting it because they had seen it or read it in the media, but others had no idea. And I think they thought perhaps it was another inspection process they had to go through with all these people in vests, sort of questioning whether they were a healthcare worker. But once they figured out why we were there and what they were getting, they were all equally delighted and pleased and thankful to be recognized.
Yeah, those are the good stories to get out. There's a lot of negative. That's a positive we need to reinforce. Last question, as I always ask all my guests, what are you looking forward to when the pandemic's over? Well,
sort of getting back to a normal life. I mean, I reflect on the fact that, Mother's Day just passed, and for those of us who still have mothers and love their mothers and can see their mothers, Mine stopped by the house, sat in the car, and I stood on the front lawn and blew her a kiss. I couldn't even hug or kiss my own mother on Mother's Day. And so I'm alone. I mean, everyone in the city is pretty much in the same boat with respect to that. But just getting back to sort of, especially the family relationship, I think is really important. And getting that back to some sort of normal time would be great. And then, of course, all of us are looking to get outside and resume normal activity and be able to have friends over and sort of, just start the summer. And that's what it feels like now as the warm weather is approaching. Summer is starting and people are going to want to get out and get together and do the things they're used to doing. And so I, like everyone else, want to do that, but I want to make sure that we're also doing it in a safe way and not putting myself, my family, or anyone else in the community at risk. And so we just have to keep doing what we're doing because it's working. I appreciate that the community has really attached themselves to the washing the hands, the self-isolation, and the distancing messaging. They're taking heed, and it's showing because the numbers are certainly going in the right direction. I'm thankful for that. And I, like you, want to get back to all those normal activities we enjoy in the summer as quickly as possible. And I think the more that we continue to do this and we see the numbers drop, we'll be able to return to that normal again.
Well, got our fingers crossed.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks, Drew. We really appreciate your time this morning. Please stay safe and stay well.
Yeah, you too. Great to see you, Robert. Thanks for calling.